columns caused them to buckle, bringing the whole building down? The answers lie in the smoking rubble. Many of Sangpung's support columns still stand, testimony to their strength and reliability. Other factors or mistakes must have caused Sangpung's collapse.
Very seldom does a structural failure, particularly a very, very bad one, happen because of a single mistake. A lot of things usually have to go wrong before you have a structural failure.
Investigators know that other clues lie scattered around the site, but they can't get to them until the rescue work is done. And there's no telling when that might be. A few days after the collapse, they're still finding bodies, but not much else. Hope is beginning to dwindle that anyone beneath the pile could have survived. But at least one person trapped beneath them is still holding on to life. And there may be others. The fact that anyone could survive in such a disaster may seem miraculous. But a person inside a collapsing building has one thing going for them. The concrete often breaks into large slabs. The cascading slabs come to rest against stairs or other objects. And in these isolated sanctuaries, the lucky can avoid being crushed or suffocated, at least for a time. When Sangpung collapsed, 19-year-old sales clerk Sung Hyung Park ran for the stairs. And ended up in an air pocket.
살려주세요.
She's not sure how long she's been there.
누구 없어요?
Every so often, she calls out for help
누구 없어요?
and hears only silence in return. Smoke from fires burning nearby drifts into her tiny cave. She tells herself the rescue teams must be getting closer. If she could only let them know where she was.
There were all kinds of things strewn about on the floor beneath me. I groped around and found a piece of broken pipe.
살려주세요.
But her banging produces no response. And far above, rescuers are about to make a decision that will put Park in even greater peril. Salvage workers bring in heavy equipment to remove the largest slabs of debris. As they shift the rubble, they risk crushing anyone trapped below. Still sealed within her concrete tomb at the bottom of the pile, Sung Hyung Park drifts in and out of sleep. So far, she's heard nothing but silence. But now she hears the muted sounds of machines far above her.
괜찮아?
And then she hears something else. On the other side of a fallen beam, a familiar voice drifts in her direction.
아니, 힘내.
It's one of Park's co-workers from the store, hidden behind some rubble.
건이랑 얘기를 한 게 건이가 너무
She kept telling me that she was badly hurt.
너무 아프다고 살려달라고
She kept begging me to help her.
살려달라고 막 그렇게 애원하고 그러니까
I told her to stay calm and not to talk too much because it would drain her.
말하지 말라고 힘들어 보이니까 힘드니까 말하지 말라고.
But she must have been in terrible pain because she kept talking and crying.
되게 고통스러웠었어요 건이는.
Meanwhile, above them, rescue workers are about to get a much-needed morale boost. They find a young salesman from the shoe department. For more than a week, he's been imprisoned in the sweltering darkness. But 21-year-old Myung Suk Choi is not only alive, he's uninjured. It's a powerful reminder that others may still be clinging to life in the levels that haven't been reached. The rescuers intensify their efforts. But below them, time has run out for one of the victims. Sung Young Park's friend and co-worker has fallen silent.
그 언니가 죽었다는 생각을 했을 때
She must have died.
나중에 사람들 목소리 났을 때도 무섭지.
But even then, I never thought that I was going to die.
정말로 계속 잠
I was never frightened.
저도 그게 왜 그런지
I just kept closing my eyes and falling asleep.
그게 막 불안하거나 나는 죽을 거야.
I thought eventually they were bound to find me.
잠이 더 잘 오지 않았나 싶어요.
At this point, Sung Hyung Park's main worry is dehydration. She's desperately thirsty. And then, something happens that seems like a miracle. Water begins to drip into her air pocket. Above her, firemen are hosing down the still smoldering rubble and inadvertently helping Sung Hyung stay alive. It's now been 2 weeks since the collapse. And for the investigators, it's time to find some answers. They shift their attention from the overloaded 5th floor to the roof and find more miscalculations and mistakes. To cool the store's wide open spaces, the owners had placed 3 huge air conditioners on the roof. Together, they weigh 36 tons when they're empty. When filled with fluids in the summer, their weight almost triples to 87 tons, 4 times what the roof was designed to support. When the builders' load calculations are checked, it's clear that they failed to compensate for all the additional weight. In fact, they did the worst possible thing. They thinned the columns meant to carry it. The list of mistakes made by the builders is growing. Yet in spite of the errors, Sampoong's basic design was so solid that it remained standing for more than 5 years. But Sampoong was in distress. And when a building is in distress, it lets people know. There were warning signs at the Sampoong Mall, and they were ignored. Why? The collapse of the Sangpoong shopping mall is one of the most deadly structural failures in history. As the death toll mounts, South Koreans demand answers. How could a well-designed building simply collapse on its own?
Typically, a steel-reinforced concrete building can't just arbitrarily collapse. It has to start cracking. It has to start spalling. It has to start breaking. Now, you can ignore the building, of course, but typically it gives you a lot of warning that it's in trouble.
Typically, but not always. Sometimes a building gives almost no warning at all. That was the case in a much celebrated structure outside of Paris. 2003, the Roissy Charles de Gaulle Airport is undergoing a transformation. Its spacious new terminals are the state-of-the-art in building design. newest is Terminal 2E. The roof of its long, expansive concourse seems to float on air.
When you're inside the structure, it appears to be staying up by magic because all the parts that are creating the illusion are on the outside of the structure.
Steel fingers and struts squeeze the terminal's elliptical roof from the sides, keeping it aloft. It's an ingeniously designed structure that's destined to fail. 11 months after it opens, tiny cracks appear in the wall. A chunk of cement falls. Terminal officials quickly decide to cordon off the area. But moments later, part of the roof of Terminal 2E collapses. 4 people are killed. Like so many modern designs, the building plans for the Charles de Gaulle terminal had no previous track record. Technology and safety margins were stretched to their limit, but there were few signs the building was in danger. But that wasn't the case at Sampong. At Sampong, the warning signs were everywhere. On the afternoon of the disaster, diners in a restaurant on the 5th floor spot cracks in the ceiling. It's worse in the kitchen. Dust is falling, and the floor has begun to sag. A table tilts ominously. The restaurant alerts the building's owners. They call in a building inspector. The inspector takes a first-hand look at the damaged roof and the worrisome tilt of the kitchen floor, which were captured in photographs the previous day. He declares the building unsafe and suggests an immediate evacuation. But the owners are convinced that the trouble is confined to the roof. So to protect it from the vibrations of the building's air conditioners, they order them shut off. A worker is brought in to repair the ceiling cracks, and the 5th floor is closed until the work is complete. Then the owners move their own valuables to the basement, and they themselves leave the building. But they decide the other floors should remain open for business. The owners never give their employees any inkling that they might be in danger.
It's clear they knew the building was in distress. It was a fatally dying structure, and they still left people in it.
It's 16 days after Sampong's collapse. With little hope of finding any more survivors, workers are attacking the rubble with a vengeance. They never imagine that one young woman is miraculously still struggling for her life beneath them. Or that now they're in danger of crushing her. For many days, Sung-hyung Park has been drifting in and out of consciousness. Now, the sound of the machines above brings new hope. But neither her voice nor her small metal pipe can compete with the racket overhead. Then, the pile suddenly shifts. It's collapsing under the weight of the machinery. Park's concrete coffin is slowly closing in around her. The last victim of a building that had been failing slowly but inexorably for years. Yet something, one final mistake, had pushed it over the edge. as investigators are about to find out. The investigation into the collapse of the Sampung shopping mall has uncovered a shocking number of misjudgments and shortcuts. The miscalculations include reducing the building's support columns by 25%, shaving the columns by the escalators even more, adding an extra story, and filling it with heavy equipment. There was also a problem with the drop panels, which strengthened the column-to-slab connection. But these drop panels simply weren't strong enough. Roger McCarthy demonstrates how the principle works.
I'm simulating the effect of putting reinforcing bar between the column and what's going to be the floor structure.
The small circular tabs play the part of the drop panels.
Now I'm going to take the floor, put it on our building, and voila, we have a building. I'm using water now to simulate the weight addition to the structure. If this were a department store, this could be merchandise. There is tremendous redundancy between the pillars that support the load.
If a column fails, the distribution of load will keep the structure standing.
I have completely removed a column. And you can see the other columns pick up the load of the floor and still conduct it down to the foundation.
But if a drop panel fails, the results are different. At Sangpung, the drop panels held for 5 years. Then the column started to punch through to the roof. A photograph taken the day before the collapse shows the extent of the damage. And the mistakes didn't stop there. Instead of tying in the floors with L-shaped rebar, the builders only extended the rebar a few inches into the walls. That meant that once a collapse started, there was little to slow it down. Was it simply that too much load over too long a time put too much strain on the building? Or was there one final straw that had doomed the Sampung shopping center? Three clues lie amid the rubble. The building's massive air conditioners. To cool their spacious shopping mall, Sampung's owners had placed 3 29-ton air coolers on its roof. They weigh 4 times what the roof is designed to carry. That's when the final mistake is made. When the cooling system is on, neighbors complain about the noise. Nearly 2 years before the collapse, the owners decide to move them. But to save money, they make a disastrous error. They don't use a crane. Instead, they put the blocks on rollers and push them to the other side. The heavy air coolers splinter and crack the roof from one end to the other.
I'm appalled at how fast and loose they were playing with the physics. You can't defy the laws of physics, and that's what you're attempting to do here.
A fractured concrete roof cannot transfer its load efficiently onto its supporting columns. Over time, it sags. Then the columns below begin to punch through. The photo of the roof, taken the day before the collapse, clearly shows the extent of the damage.
The photos were shocking. They should have realized immediately that there was a serious fundamental problem.
For the Sampung shopping mall, the die is cast. Now, it's only a matter of time.
Actually, it's surprising it stood up for 5.5 years.
June 29th, 1995. 22 months after its roof is hopelessly damaged, the building can take no more. In the afternoon, the columns on the 5th floor begin to punch through. In the restaurant, a table tilts ominously. As the 5th floor droops, it pulls on the weakened roof. The fractures deepen. Cracks appear in the restaurant's ceiling below. Then, just before 6 p.m., the final cascade of events. The 5th floor, where the columns are thinnest around the escalator, gives way first. As it falls, it drags the roof down with it. The top 2 floors of the Sangpung shopping mall are in motion. Nothing below can stop them.
Very quickly, you see what happens. Everything is in the basement in no time.
Even a professional demolition man probably couldn't have done a better job at just making it collapse so neatly, as if it was sliced by a knife.
And beneath it all is 19-year-old sales clerk Sung Hyun Park, who believes she's been buried for about 5 days. But in fact, it's been 16, with no food and little water. It may be the longest anyone has ever survived under a collapsed building. Above her, workers continue their salvage operation, with no expectation of finding anyone else alive. But they're actually digging just above Sunghyung Park. Then, suddenly, a blast of sunlight. The workers have taken the lid off her concrete tomb with a steam shovel.
이렇게 포크레인이 바로 제 얼굴로 이렇게 왔기
The
때문에
crane came towards my face. I didn't have time to
안
think.
그러면 제가
I might have been severely injured or even killed.
상황이었기 때문에
So I cried out,
살려달라고
help.
외칠 수밖에 없었어요.
Workers hear a cry, but at first, they can't see anyone.
바깥에서 저한테
They asked me, is there anyone in there?
제가 사람
A
있다고
worker dug around the hole with his hands. Then we could see each other, and I realized I was going to make it out alive.
Sunghyun Park is pulled from the rubble. Amazingly, she's not seriously hurt. Her undying optimism and uncanny luck have pulled her through. She spends a month in the hospital regaining her strength. But in time, she recovers fully. She's one of about 1,000 people who escaped the Sampung disaster with their lives. But 501 others didn't make it. When the details behind the collapse become public, South Koreans are outraged. The building's owner and his son are convicted of criminal negligence and sent to prison. Investigators also discover that to get their store built, the owners bribed officials. 12 government inspectors also receive prison sentences. The government orders a check of all recent construction and toughens building codes. And why did the owners do what they did? At the time of the collapse, Sangpung was taking in hundreds of thousands of dollars a day. As Sunghyun Park sees it, it came down to one thing: money.
그러니까 이제 와서 생각해 보면
Looking back on it now, I think it's something
정말
that just
있을 수
cannot
없는 일이라고
happen.
생각을 하거든요. 그거는
I think in the very end, it's all about one person's greed.
The bottom line is this: buildings are supposed to stay upright, and they almost always do. But as the buildings of the future continue to go up, with their radical designs and untested engineering, We are nearing the limits of what we can safely accomplish.
Anytime you take a design closer and closer to the limit of the material, and anytime you shrink a factor of safety, with each foot closer to the edge of the cliff, place each foot down very carefully.
The 21st century is sure to be filled with marvels of engineering that seem to stay standing by magic. We can only hope that they're well designed and well built. And when a building starts speaking to us, we should listen before it's too late.